Welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. My name is Chris Schad. I write for FanSided and ZoneCoverage.com. We do this right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel, and we're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Today's guest, you see him. He is a member of SKOR North. He also does Vikings content for Sleeper, and his name is Jason Harmon. Jason, I'm just going to go right out of the chute here and ask you, how can the Vikings build a championship roster around Will Reichard? Because I think the clock is ticking. Every time they show him on the sidelines, he looks unhappy. You talked to Will. You actually met our tribal chief, Will Reichard, in Arizona. So, I mean, what was that like?
Kind of ironically, I have a favorite bar, and we went to the bar next door because it has some arcade games first. We were just in town visiting back where we lived before we moved to Minnesota. And I'm closing out, and my wife texts me, and I just get a text that just says Richard. She had sent me a series of texts, but the only one I said was Richard. And I'm like, Richard. And then I see a second text correcting that saying Reichard. I'm like, Reichard? What is she talking about Will Reichard for? And then he just walked in, and I look up, and I was like, oh, that is the greatest athlete on the planet just walked into this bar and nobody's noticed him. I'm going to go talk to him. So yeah, I think, the first step was drafting him. That was the first step in building the championship team, but I'm curious to see how Hecker works out at punter. I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings maybe give Oscar Chapman another go in training camp because he's part of the international player program. So they can kind of retain his rights pretty easily. And he was really, really good at punting last year. But when it comes to Will Reichard's job, he was unfortunately terrible at holding. So I'm very curious to see who his holder is going to be. I think it's going to be Hecker. But, that guy, just the most unassuming, nice, normal dude you've ever seen in your life. And it turns out he's got an absolute bazooka for a leg.
Like, I'm sure if the holding thing doesn't work out, he'll probably kick down, the door of Rob Brzezinski or whoever the hell the GM's going to be.
Oh yeah. He'll go in angry. He'll send some angry tweets. We're going to have a dig saga going on. That's what Will Reichard seems like to me personally.
Will Reichard just cryptic tweets everywhere, just with what's going on right here. Why is he selling, backpacks at Walmart?
The absolute GOAT himself.
The card.
Yeah.
The greatest, well, for right now, the greatest Viking kicker of all time, but I feel like I got to knock on wood before I say that.
Let's not jinx it. You don't want any more broadcast wires showing up where they're not supposed to be.
Exactly. Well, today's show, we'll run it down for the listeners. Basically, the question I have is what the Vikings are doing this offseason. What are they doing in the draft? What are they doing at general manager? Is there a plan in place other than Dylan Thieneman no matter what? And I think we should just start with the offseason. Obviously, people know they fired their GM, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Their big free agent signings was Eric Wilson and James Pierre. They got Kyler Murray, who appears to be well ahead of J.J. McCarthy to be the starter, and they could trade Jonathan Grenard. And apparently somebody got liquored up at the combine and just told everybody they were drafting Dylan Thieneman. So all things considered, how are you feeling about the Vikings offseason so far?
I would say I'm not feeling much of anything because there's so much we don't know and there's so much we've yet to see. I think, the biggest thing, well, let's kind of go in order of events. The Kwesi thing in the moment made me more mad than happy, not because I didn't think it was a deserved firing, but I think the timing and process behind it just screamed dysfunction. And, I was in Mobile covering the Senior Bowl. I had a quick chat with Kwesi while he was walking into the corner end zone to cover or to scout some of the offensive line work. He was there that entire week. And I didn't notice any other Viking staffers outside of some of the coaches that were assigned to work the Senior Bowl and then some of the guys who were maybe around the convention center where they were doing player interviews, but he wasn't really standing with any other guys in Vikings gear. A lot of the guys, John Lynch, guys like that had assistants or other people from their front office with them. So I kind of thought that was a little odd, but didn't think much of it. But I think the timing of that firing, I'm still worried about it, even if I think the outcome could be good, because obviously the team didn't get new information in Mobile unless the theory that maybe there was a potential trade that came up that week that Kwesi botched or something like that. But for all the reasons they listed in firing him, none of that was new information. So either it shows dysfunction in not making an effective decision when it's advantageous to do so, and you could have your pick of all the available GM candidates, or two, something crazy happened at TCO as soon as Kwesi left the house. And to me, that also speaks to dysfunction. So I'm very curious. Obviously, at the end of the day, if they go out and make a deep playoff run this year and legitimate Super Bowl contenders, none of that matters. It all works out. But it just kind of continues a trend of, I'm not going to say it's going to be to this extent, but kind of like with the Zimmer and Spielman thing, we just got these little hints and pieces that something along the way, there was something off and there was more to the story. I'm starting to feel that way. I don't think it's on that level by any means, and I hope I'm wrong. But the way they fired him, just something's iffy about it. I'm not sure. And then with free agency signings, nothing too exciting. Would I have liked to have seen them maybe be a little more aggressive to get ETN, or sorry, I think he corrected it, it's Echen, get him? Sure. But I understand the cap restraints, and I understand not wanting to be crazy in the trade market. I'm very excited for Kyler. I am a JJ McCarthy truther. I've been one of the louder voices, but given how the entire situation went down and where it seemed to obviously be going, of all the available realistic options, only one genuinely excited me, and it was Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the big thing here. You mentioned the two things. Is one, it feels like this team didn't want to do anything drastic after the last two off seasons, where, you know, they spent all the money, they got the quarterback, they did all that stuff. There's this big plan in place. This is kind of their idea, like, hey, let's just lay low this off season. Let's get a different quarterback that's going to create some headlines, but nothing else out of that shape. But it just feels like their plan is run it back with a different quarterback. And that sounds great if, you know, this 14-win team that they built a couple years ago was a little bit younger, but this roster is getting a little bit older. It's starting to go the wrong direction. And I feel like the Vikings, it just feels like they live in the fantasy world where, well, if we get better quarterback play, we'll be fine. It's like they kind of ignored the fact that they were a 4-8 team, and now Kyler Murray's just going to patch everything over.
Yeah, I think if they trade Grenard, I will have very, very serious concerns about what this team actually thinks it's doing. I love Dallas Turner. I've been, you know, he's had his rough moments, especially filling in for Van Ginkel because of the unique way that Andrew Van Ginkel plays in Brian Flores' defense. But I still think Jonathan Grenard, even though statistically last year wasn't on paper the most impressive, he still wrecks and impacts games at such an insane level that if you're really saying we're a quarterback away from the Super Bowl, either Kyler Murray is going to be that guy, or JJ McCarthy is going to rise to the occasion and prove to be that guy, and we're going to make a run, I wouldn't get rid of somebody as talented as Jonathan Grenard, especially for a second-round pick. Somebody calls me with a first, that's tempting because you're trying to look at the best of both worlds and how you can plan for the future. But I have it on good authority. Maybe I'll drop a little knowledge I was given, is that when it comes to contract extension, that would be part of a Grenard trade. Him and the Eagles are on the same page. Where the disconnect is with the Vikings and the Eagles on trade compensation. And so now Grenard says, hey, I'll play where I play next year, but I know what I can get offered. And I believe that is where potentially we could see a holdout situation if he is not traded by August. I from what I've been told, it wouldn't be a shock if he participated in OTAs, things like that. But once it comes time for training camp in the preseason, if he does not have a deal either being traded to Philly or with the Vikings matching those numbers, I'd be surprised if he was out there willy-nilly just playing on his current contract.
The Grenard thing is interesting because we've been down this road before with Daniil Hunter, and it seems like just when it feels like the star player is going to get traded somewhere, they come up with a 1-year band-aid and he's moved forward.
The Rob special. You have
yes.
the right guy in charge for that.
And whether he gets the GM job or not, he's going to be the guy who's going to be drafting that contract. Like deep down, I think, because like here's the thing about the Vikings offseason. There have not been a lot of win now moves. It's been, we're building for the future. We're building. Of course, don't call it a rebuild because that's a dirty word at TCO Performance Center.
Well, if it is, it's a competitive rebuild. You know, you gotta use your branding correctly.
We gotta win those 9 games and be better than the Jets, Browns, and Packers. So
and the Lions this year. Hey, that's a win.
Yes, they did do that. But no, I mean that's where everything is just interesting to me because the Grenard thing, you want to hang on to him because he's a good player and you don't want to let him go. But if he's asking for $30 million, which I believe Alec Lewis stated in his report, that was kind of what he was looking for. I think that's way too much, especially for a player who has trouble finishing plays. I know he had 12 sacks 2 years ago, but he's got one of the highest missed tackle rates among edge rushers. And it's kind of like Wile E. Coyote catching the Roadrunner sometimes, where he's like, well, now what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So I think the Vikings need Jonathan Grenard, but it's hard to put him into the puzzle when he's got this big demand of $30 million per year.
100%. Yeah. And I think these are things that I think they, and I'm not sure if they did, but this is the type of thing where we're firing Kwesi earlier and settling in. And I'm not even saying I would have loved if they hired an actual GM. I would have loved if they did that by mid-January before the Senior Bowl, so that because whoever's coming in is going to be coming in with the draft class and offseason decisions they had no part of. And I don't love that if it isn't Rob, which I don't think it. My gut tells me I don't think he wants to do it. I think he wants to go back to the front office. There's been numerous times in past years where they considered Rob for open GM spots and he immediately withdrew himself from consideration. So if something has changed, maybe it's changed. But if they would have had a GM and been able to come up with a full offseason plan early on, you could have tried to figure out the Grenard situation earlier before deciding how to address free agency and the level of urgency. Because right now, the way free agency worked is, hey, we're fine. We like our roster. We're going to bring back Aaron Jones. We're going to bring back Eric Wilson. We're going to add this other guy who, you know, is maybe a sleeper candidate for a pretty solid corner, but isn't exactly, you know, getting anybody jumping out of their seats in James Pierre. But then we're going to go, you know, we're going to take this magical opportunity that fell into our lap to pay vet minimum to Kyler Murray because we desperately need a better quarterback because this is our competitive window. And it's very confusing because usually, you know, Kevin O'Connell came from the Rams when they were doing well, and it's still, they made a Super Bowl with Jared Goff and they still said not good enough. We're going to burn every first round pick we have for the next 5 years. And we're going to trade for these guys who maybe have 1 to 2 years left on their deal and keep doing that until it pays off. They had that urgency of, we are in our competitive window, and because of that, we're going to build the absolute best team we can. So not necessarily saying that's what the Vikings should have done per se, but there is just a level of urgency you usually see with teams like that. And so I just wish it was settled, or at least they had figured a lot of this out earlier, because if there's still no answers, you're then heading into the draft. Even if Grenard traded, yes, Dallas Turner will come in. You'll still need another edge for depth and somebody who can be explosive in case Dallas or Van Ginkel get hurt. Where do you address that in the draft? Are you looking at a day 2 pick? If you get the right guy at 18, are you going there? Or is this somebody where you have Grenard and you have Turner? Maybe you look at the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th and get a guy later on that you could develop over time. It impacts a lot of things. And I think that maybe having that off-season unity and having this information earlier would have been more beneficial.
It just doesn't seem like they have a plan.
They don't. Their plan is to react to things as they happen. They are clearly, and I get it. And I'm not mad at Rob about it. I mean, he was, again, this whole situation is not one that breeds success for many people. And I think he's done a hell of a job given the circumstances. He's done a great job representing the franchise in the few interviews and public facing things he's done. But they are having these conversations and they're trying to handle them as they come. But there's not I'm a big Star Wars guy. I hate the sequel trilogy. I loved the first one, Force Awakens, at the time, and now I hate it because when you combine it with the full story, they never had a plan and it was a disaster, right? So now that ruins something that on its own was maybe a good thing. When you look at the full context, it didn't make sense. That's what could potentially happen with the Kyler Murray thing, is if the rest of the offseason doesn't serve to shore up some existing holes on this team and make this team more competitive, then the Kyler Murray thing in and of itself is no longer that great because it doesn't actually move the needle.
Yeah. And with Kyler, how are you feeling about that? Because I think a lot of people look at Kyler Murray and they, the old study clause and all that stuff, but Kevin O'Connell's sitting there like, hey, he's a good passer, like in the range of, I don't know, Jeff George to Sam Darnold. Like, where do you see Kyler Murray fitting in?
I'd say closer to Darnold, probably. I'm not saying he will be Darnold, but look, if I were to sit here and say Kevin O'Connell needs a new QB, pick the perfect fit, I would have never picked Kyler Murray. If I was given the list of available options, the easy Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson trade buttons were off the table, which I have it on, good authority. The Vikings at least had conversations about if that could even be an option, which makes sense. Like they said, they were not going to leave anything unturned. They didn't get deep into trade talks with anybody, but they definitely at least bounced the ideas. But out of the available options, Kirk Cousins or Geno Smith may have fit the offense more, but their ceilings are significantly lower. The Vikings are also still between Kyler or McCarthy. And if neither of them work out, then we're going to hit the 27 draft class, trying to find not just a quarterback band-aid, their long-term quarterback. And Kyler's 29. He could still be your guy with the way he plays, generously 5 to 6 years, maybe conservatively if he stays healthy. So I like the move in that context. I think you still have that opportunity. I lived in Arizona 12 years. I saw a lot of Kyler Murray. He is the most infuriating quarterback I've ever watched the Vikings play in person, because physically what he's capable of doing doesn't make sense. He will run 10, 15 yards backwards, not like in a scramble. He will physically just turn his body around and face the other way, plants his right foot, which is now his front foot, facing backwards, pivot and like crow hop a ball that's either an insane completion for a touchdown or the worst interception you've ever seen. And I think in Kevin O'Connell's offense, that could be a little fun, the F it, Jefferson or Addison are down there somewhere mentality. But I am curious because he's going to need to make some adjustments for Kyler. He clearly did not want to make those adjustments for McCarthy last year. So it'll be a little weird if he's suddenly like, dude, I can't wait to completely rework my offense around this guy after last year being mad that McCarthy had a different skill set. And it'll be weird, but it's definitely something that needs to happen. I think Kyler, if he stays healthy, is probably going to be the starter. I'm not completely out on McCarthy winning the job. I'd say it's like 95-5, and I'm a McCarthy guy. The only reason I leave the door open is because if there's a scenario where McCarthy shows up all spring and all summer and is just night and day better than Kyler and Carson Wentz, the team is actively more incentivized to play McCarthy than anybody else. They invested, he has, this will be year 3. So one more year, or this year and next year left on his rookie deal. And then the 5th year option. So he's going to be, they're technically paying him more money than Kyler. They invested a total of 3 draft picks to get him. They traded 2 or 3 picks to move up one spot, and then they invested the 10th overall pick. He's still younger. So in all those ways, he's the guy who, if you said, hey, either of these two could be your quarterback, you're probably going to want it to be McCarthy if he proves to be the guy. So yes, I'm very aware Kyler is your day one starter, pretty much certainly, but there is still a chance that the team has to have a conversation because it is more beneficial for them for McCarthy to go out and absolutely set the world on fire this summer.
And I think that's why I've said, I don't think this is a slam dunk. A lot of people are like, well, you signed Kyler Murray. He's a former number 1 overall pick. And
He spent nothing to get him.
Exactly. It's $1.2 million, which is a lot to you and I. I mean, we'd take it. But at the same time, for JJ McCarthy, they're bringing in a quarterback that may not be a fit with Kevin O'Connell's offense. Like if he starts, short circuiting and running around, like Kevin O'Connell's going to be like, dude, give me the guy that I'm comfortable with and have a year working with. And if, he's not exactly the picture of health either. He's gotten hurt. Last year was a pretty serious injury with the Liz Frank. And then I think Albert Breer called it a blood flow issue or something with his foot. Like that doesn't sound good. Like I don't think JJ McCarthy is dead as a Minnesota Viking, but it's a very small window that he has to take advantage of.
And I see a lot of people say, well, Wentz is clearly the backup. I don't see that. He's getting a lot for a QB3, but it's also Case Keenum's getting paid quite a bit. Or no, Tyson Beignet too. I think when he was QB3 or QB2, like there's some weird backup contracts. But I'd say, I'm fully going in expecting Kyler to get the job. But I think if JJ shows up, and then there's the conversation about Wentz. Well, Wentz is clearly QB2. Wentz is probably out of the three the skill set that KOC most wants, but he has such a low ceiling in regards to what he can be at his best. Like, overall, who operated when they played the offense more efficiently? Take out the Chargers game because that wasn't fair to count for Wentz. He should not have been out there. Yeah. Probably Wentz. He was much more poised. It wasn't flashy, but who had much higher highs when they were there? It was McCarthy, and I'm sure Kyler will be the same way. The Vikings still need to figure out with both Kyler and McCarthy, what are their ceilings and how can we tap into that? Because I think with either of them, you're going to have some lows. You're going to have some bozo plays, some plays where they maybe break the pocket too early and miss an opportunity that if they hung in there an extra half second, they would be able to have Jefferson or Addison downfield. These things are going to happen. And then obviously injury risks. But I think both of them, if they can live up to what they're physically capable of, I wouldn't really consider Wentz as my QB2 because his ceiling physically is so insanely capped, especially at his age and after that injury last year. So I'd say, could Wentz be QB2? Yes. But again, I think the entire depth chart is up to competition in a sense that it's just going to be first, the best performing quarterback's QB1, the second best performing quarterback's QB2, and the third best is QB3. I don't think Kyler would be QB3. I think at that point they would trade him, but I don't see that happening.
I'm interested that you did not mention Max Brosmer in that conversation.
Dude, I caused so many problems. I blame myself. I was so wrong on the QB situation last year. I was really excited about Brosmer. I'm not even a Gophers fan, but he genuinely, and again, you have to go into the context of who he was going up against in camp. He looked to be the most consistent day in, day out quarterback on the entire roster in practice. And I thought, hey, if McCarthy doesn't work out, we got a Brock Purdy situation. Turns out, no. As soon as he played an actual football game, he was out there flailing and hailing about. So I think they'd be foolish not to keep him on the practice squad. He's smart. I would say, realistically, and this is not, sometimes people say this and it's taken as disrespect. I think if Brosmer wants to be an NFL QB, he could find opportunities to be a practice squad guy or a backup in this NFL. But to see him come in undrafted and to see him put in the work he did and to grasp the offense as well as he did, I think he's a guy who could be a coach on Kevin O'Connell's staff at some point. He's very, very smart. He handles himself incredibly well. When he wasn't taking reps in 11 on 11, he would mimic the QB who was in their cadence and take ghost snaps and do his drop back. Like he put in too much work for him not to have some role within the organization that maybe is a practice squad guy. Heck, if you're in a situation where you do trade one of the three QBs, then yeah, he'd probably be your most natural QB3 fit. And you just hope you don't have to put him out there and he can continue to develop because he does have skills. But whatever it is, I think he can contribute to the team. He's just a good football guy. He's got to work on how he reacts in game. That Christmas game was hilarious. What was it? 3 net passing yards and we beat the Lions. That's the last season, man. Last season, I got roasted for saying this because it's not quite as bad, but it's the closest thing I've felt to 2010 since. Just anything that the injuries, the plane having to turn back around, going to New York, like the weird statistical anomalies. Like obviously the roof didn't fall in and Brett Favre didn't die in, at the, TCF turf, but there was some random stuff going on this year, and Rosemer was certainly a part of that.
The one thing that I said when the season was over, I'm like, I just need this team out of my face. Like get this team out of my face and get your shit together. And they haven't, I mean, that's the thing. They haven't gotten their shit together. We still don't know what's going to happen, but I'm
so curious what they do with KOC if this year doesn't go well.
I don't think his job's on the line though.
I think at best, and people are like, man, you're hard on KC. Secret, I love Kevin O'Connell. I love him. I think he's really smart. I think he's an incredible face of the organization. I think the players love him. I think those are all true and incredibly valuable things. But my God, he is the first coach since 2018 to enter year 5 without a playoff win. Are we really, really going to be okay entering year 6 if we don't do that? I don't care if I have Bill Belichick in his prime, Andy Reid, Pete Carroll. I don't care you can name any like great coach. I'm biased towards Pete Carroll. I'm a USC fan, but any of those guys, Don Shula, Jimmy Johnson, whatever. If you go 5 or 6 years without a playoff win, we got to have a conversation at a certain point. And so for me, I'm like, everything they're doing points to, hey, we're going to find Kevin O'Connell's players, and then we're going to find Kevin O'Connell's GM after the draft. Like all these things, it's like he's got this massive leash, and I get it from an ownership perspective. He's a great coach to have, but when does the bill come due for results? I think you can feel both ways, but I'm very curious where the Wilfs line is on that. And if they bring in a new GM, what say will that guy have? And when will they start to listen to him?
Here's where I would push back on this, because I think the offseason is telling us everything we need to know. You made a video, which, by the way, Jason's got awesome social media videos. So he, post a little thing here or there. But Alec Lewis's article mentioning him again, he mentioned that, a lot of the signs point towards whoever the GM has to work with Kevin O'Connell.
Correct.
And when you hear that and you see the moves, like if Kevin O'Connell's job was on the line, and, a lot of people have said he's kind of running the ship here without a GM, like we would have seen, big, huge moves.
I agree.
Over the place.
100%. Yeah. I'm in agreement with that. Everything they're doing points to KO is going to almost get a fresh start to kind of build things the way he wants. But I think there should be some trepidation in that, because at a certain point, from a fan perspective, we have to see results. Maybe if there's like, oh man, Kwesi messed everything up so bad, we have to give KO 2 or 3 more years, no matter whatever this arbitrary situation is, to kind of play that out. I don't want to wait that long. And I'm sure most people, I'm sure you don't, I'm sure most people don't, but I think it once again plays into the theme of the offseason of it leaves so many unknowns. Like when, if this doesn't work, where does the accountability stop and end, and where does it begin? And I think that's something that's going to be fair for fans to question. Is one playoff win enough this year? Probably, to move things in the right direction. Is no playoff wins enough? Is missing the playoffs going to change the conversation? God forbid Kyler gets hurt, McCarthy struggles, Wentz is in it, we end with 6-7 wins. Is that going to be an issue? Like, there's no sense of what is the breaking point of accountability for this team to start winning when it matters. And that's what I'm curious. And I hope we don't have to find out, because I hope, as I think could happen, Kyler stays healthy, they mold the offense around him, and this team makes a run. But if not, you're going to have a massive divide in the fan base, I think, heading into next offseason. I think it could get really chippy real fast.
Well, I mean, Vikings fans always are on the same page.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's no arguments or, everything's just in harmony and it's perfect. Just like Dylan Thieneman to the Vikings and all these mock drafts. What is going on, do you think? Like, because it's got to be more simpler than just, well, Harrison Smith might retire and they need another safety. Like, why do you think everybody is mocking Dylan Thieneman to the Vikings at 18?
I just think it's a lazy. Here's what I think. Here's my genuine thought. I think a couple people started doing it and no one knew what the hell the Vikings were doing. So it became the easiest plug and play answer. I've seen, to credit a couple guys, put like Caleb Woods or guys like that. And I'm like, hey, you're thinking outside the box. I think my current guess is if he's on the board, I think it's Sadiq. I am moving, and I'm also, I don't think he falls. I think he goes top 10 to 14, but I tweeted earlier, if Jordan Tyson is there, yes. I would not, because again, this is the Kevin O'Connell show. If I'm Kevin O'Connell and I'm hedging kind of my bets for how do I build my identity and also protect myself over the next couple of years, because I wouldn't say he's on the hot seat this year, but I think he knows he's on the hot seat of being on the hot seat. You know what I mean? I think he knows if things don't go well, then that conversation starts. I think Jordan Tyson is very intriguing. Even if you extend Addison, so what? You got your wide receiver 3 is potentially a really strong talent and he's on a rookie deal. If the Addison deal falls through, then you have your new wide receiver 2 potentially. It's the best player available approach, and it allows Kevin O'Connell to not have to have an open tryout effectively for wide receiver 3. I like Ty Felton. I don't like him as a wide receiver 3. I like him as a gadget guy that you use strategically. He cannot run routes to save his life. That may have been fixed, but during training camp, he was falling all over himself. Throws, no matter what quarterback was throwing it to him, were mistimed because he wasn't breaking at the right time or with enough sharpness. So I'm not sitting here, thinking that's the move. You could bring in DeAndre Hopkins. That would be fun. But that's really a one-year thing. But if I'm KOC and I'm like, I'm building my vision and I know how I run my offense, having Jefferson be your old guy receiver, that's a pretty big luxury to have. So I wouldn't be shocked. I think Thieneman is, it's just so hard to know. Just based off hearsay, yeah, he's definitely a potential fit. But I just wouldn't be shocked with anything. McCoy would make sense, although I don't, positionally, I don't see Brian Flores treating the cornerback position with a lot of urgency. I said yesterday he treats corners like Kevin O'Connell treats running backs. All the fans desperately want a high-level player at those positions, and the team's like, no, we don't really care about that position. So I genuinely have no idea what they're going to do. But I think if Sadiq's there, I think if Jordan Tyson falls especially, probably a team would try to trade up, and he probably wouldn't be there, but his medicals could scare off some teams. But I still think it's worth it. Like if you're trying to run Kevin O'Connell's dream offense, having 3 first-round receivers all under 30 would be really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean 3 deep, right? That's what everybody always says. It's the 3 deep dream. Also, too, I think a lot of people are going into this thinking Brian Flores needs, he needs dudes, he needs guys. They need a short, and that's true. I mean, get a cornerback who's actually, somewhat good. I think too, when it comes to Brian Flores, we don't know if he's going to be here next year. So, I mean, if you're drafting Dylan Thieneman because he's a perfect fit in Brian Flores' scheme, that seems a little short-sighted, and there's your win now move, but there's no guarantee that Thieneman turns out. The other thing is Brian Flores is making $6 million per year. Yeah. I think if you make your picks later and give him guys to develop, you basically, I think our late friend Jesse Pierce would love this analogy. Go be a stoner in a Taco Bell test kitchen and figure it out, just throw things together and whatever. Like it just feels like I think leaning into the offense is the way to go because you're going to foolproof with Kyler Murray, JJ McCarthy, or I don't know, dare I say it, a 2027 quarterback.
Correct.
Like I think that's what you do instead of, okay, we're a defensive team. We're going to lean into our defense. We're going to get a safety. But I mean, there's good safeties all over this draft. Like you got Bud Clark out of TCU. You got AJ Halsey out of LSU. Like I think the consensus mock draft, NFL mock draft database consensus board has like 6 or 7 safeties in the top 100. It's like, you can't just have eyes for Dylan Thieneman, especially when you have elite talent on the board.
And especially because once you get to the second and third rounds in this draft, and this happens with every draft, but it just seems especially true with the mocks and the speculation I'm seeing, there's so much talent you can't kick the can on because there are going to be guys who fall and there are going to be guys who are drafted way higher, like especially at different positions. You look at like the running back position, for example, after Jeremiah Love, nobody agrees on who the right, and overall it's a shaky running back class. I love Mike Washington. I love his speed. He's struggled a lot with turnovers. Other guys like Emmett Johnson, and I know he's a hometown kid. I'm not sold on Emmett Johnson because I don't think he has that long run breakaway speed. He's really good in bursts. Everyone's arguing about that. It's the same with the interior defensive line. Is Caleb Banks a good prospect? People disagree on that. Is his health worth betting on? People are disagreeing on that. Lee Hunter, is he going to be a guy who translates to the NFL? There's all these different conversations where, hey, I have to take a safety in round 1. I'll fill every other hole later. You have no idea what's going to be there. And how your board shakes out is not how other teams are going to shake out. So you have no idea if a guy you want a position you want to fill in the third, suddenly all the guys you had valued in that range, now the best options are guys you had a 5th, 6th round grade on. You have no idea. So I don't know if safety, I would draft safety in probably the first 3 rounds. I personally, I get the vibe Harrison Smith's coming back because I think if he was retiring, it would have come out already. And obviously he's not the player he once was. And he's old. I'm about to be 34 and I'm having to go to physical therapy every week. And breaking news, I sit in a chair and talk about football. I am not on a football field. And I still have to go to physical therapy every week because I am old. But I think the luxury is if he comes back and you draft a young safety, that safety can come in and let Josh Metellus do what Josh Metellus does well, which is Swiss Army knife his way around the defense. Everyone's like, oh, he lost a step last year. I'm like, well, he had to play traditional safety a lot more last year, and that's just not where his game translates in Flores' defense. So I would definitely take a safety, but I'm not overdrafting one or putting it above other guys I like. If they're truly going best player available, I don't know if safety is going to be your round 1 pick. I would definitely address it relatively early in the first couple days, but it's hard for me to see the board shaking out in a way where like Thieneman or EMW are unequivocally BPA at that point.
As someone who turned 40 this week and shut down the Champions Club last night in celebration, I can definitely emphasize or not emphasize. Empathize. Yes. I can empathize with Harrison Smith because it feels like I got hit by Harrison Smith right now, getting back on the field at age 38. I guess, you guys have a lot of things going on. Of course, the draft will heat up here in the next week or so. What do you got going on at SKOR North and Sleeper right now, Jason?
Yeah, big thing our show at SKOR North is mainly an in-season show, but I've been lucky to, go down, cover the Senior Bowl for them with Thor Nystrom. Well, partially with Thor Nystrom because he got stranded in a blizzard for one day. So I had to kind of figure that whole environment out on my own, first time being credentialed. So we had that. We've done a few draft episodes. Leighton and I, who were on the show and did the show last year with Jesse, who we recently lost. We've been doing a few things on the side, but then we are Layton and I will be hosting the Roku Fan Zone Thursday at the Purple Daily Draft Party at Mystic Lake. So we'll be doing some of our hot takes a couple times an hour, and then interviewing fans, and then doing some social media content as well. And then it's on to planning for what next season looks like. We're very interested to see, SKOR's doing a lot of new and interesting things. They started a new channel called Football Takes, which is more league centric instead of just Viking centric. They have the OL committee with Mackey, Boone, and Jeremiah Searles, which is, if you're a football head, or if you're somebody who wants to get more into understanding, the trenches of the game, give O-line committee a watch. Hearing Alex Boone and Jeremiah Searles talk football is one of the most entertaining things you could possibly listen to.
Yeah, I mean, SKOR North is, when I was battling anxiety and depression here at the beginning of the decade with COVID and stuff, SKOR North always was in my earphones while 100%. I was stocking a cooler, where it's just like, they do a good job. They do a whole bunch of other stuff. And of course, you're in the Vikings area, but I mean, you got hockey stuff.
Hockey show, the Twins. Yes. Declan's doing great stuff with the Twins, and I think I'm not a Twins fan. I'm from Southern California. The reason I'm a Vikings fan is because they were the first team my dad saw on TV. So I'm a lifelong Dodgers fan. I am not on a bandwagon. If I was a bandwagon baseball fan, I assure you I would have bandwagoned a football team as well. Trust me. But I know Twins fans weren't very optimistic, and it was going to be a year of commiseration. But now I know Declan's having fun with the kind of surprise start the Twins are having. And then they have Flagrant Howls as well that Mackey does, which is going to be, it seems like you have the draft for the Vikings. You have the Twins, winning a lot more than people expected. And then you have the Wolves and the Wild heading into their playoff series this weekend. So there's a lot of Minnesota sports content to consume right now.
And of course, we have more Viking stuff to consume over at thevikingage.com. You can check out all of the stuff going on there. My Viking stuff is currently at zonecoverage.com. I do that along with Twin stuff, and I write a little bit of Wild stuff at Hockey Wilderness. And of course, the RBN network, if you want to keep up with what's going on in the NFC North. Dairyland Express, the Windy City, Detroit Jock City. Hey, Jason, where can people follow you to get all this cool content from you?
Yeah, so if you have the Sleeper app, you can go to channels, and at the Vikings channel, you'll see all of my Vikings content over there. You could also find it on Sleeper Vikings on TikTok and Twitter, or X, whatever. It's Twitter. I'm sorry. And then
we're above the age of 30. It's Twitter to us, damn it.
I remember having to tweet via text message.
Yeah.
You remember that?
No.
Yeah, the quickest way to tweet from your phone, when you wanted to tweet from your phone, there wasn't an app. So you could bring it up on your computer and do it, but you would literally text Twitter what you wanted to tweet, and it would post it to your account. That's what I like. 2008, 2009 Twitter. Yeah, so it's Twitter. But then my personal page is just Jason Harmon NFL. Throughout the offseason, when it's just such a slow offseason for the Vikings, there's not a lot to talk about.
It's the entire league.
Nobody's
doing anything.
It's awful. Never mind. Unless you're a Patriots media person right now. But just saying. But Jason Harmon NFL, during the offseason, I do like to do a lot of throwback breakdowns and things like that of some great moments. I'm currently working on what that's going to look like this offseason. Don't want to rehash too much, but just different Vikings takes. And then through the season, I go to every home game and try to get some content there that's maybe different than what you're seeing on TV, things like that. And my goal for away games this year is Lambeau, because I have a nice little, handshake agreement with the guy who does the Packers content for Sleeper, where he's got season tickets, I got season tickets. We're actually friends despite our very dramatic differences in football teams. But we have helped each other kind of attend both games. So I'll be going to Lambeau, and then I think I'm going to go to New York. I want to go to the Jets game. I know that stadium's awful. It's hell to get to, but all I know is when the Vikings play in New York, Vikings fans show up like crazy in Midtown Manhattan. So I want to go over there and kind of see what that vibe's like. I watched a Vikings game at the bar. It's called Jack Doyle's, It's like an Irish bar, Irish pub in Midtown, not too far from Times Square. In 2017, it was, I think, Vikings. 2017 or 18. I think it was 17.
Okay.
Doing the math. Yeah. And it was Vikings Packers. It was around Christmas time. And I was there for Christmas on a solo trip. And I went and watched the Vikings game there. And now every time the Vikings are in town, they host a Vikings fleet party the night before the game at this bar. And they bring cheerleaders, everything. So it looks like New York shows up and shows out for the Vikings. So I want to go and actually see what that's like.
What was that in How I Met Your Mother, Little Minnesota, where they go to the bar and it's like, I'm drinking until I forget the 1999
Canada.
Damn, my kid Schad Tarkington. But Jason, thank you for coming on. This is the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast of the VikingAge.com. We do this right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Jason Harmon, I am Chris Schad. You can follow me at The Real Chris Schad. SKOR.